Alrighty. All right, welcome to another BIMbc presentation. Today, we're just gonna start off with building an immersive world using Enscape. My name is Simon. And today, about me. So I'm a BIM manager at Via Architecture, Perkin Eastman Studio. I've been using Revit since 2008. I've been using AutoCAD since the DOS days, and I love photography. So you've probably seen some of my screenshot why I love photography, because I love to build something and then just take photography out of, landscape kind of a world. Well, here are a couple of things about me is that I love to push Revit beyond its limit. So I build a lot of this massive, crazy stuff, families inside Revit. So you're able to build like a very interactive world where you can actually make it fun rather than making it boring, because that's one of the things about Revit is that people say it's very limited, but it's not so. So for today, I'm just going to basically show you guys how you can create a quick scene within Revit, okay, using, I wouldn't say using Enscape, but using other software just to fill in the scene. And then I'm just going to show you how to add video and sound to Enscape just to make the world a little bit livelier. All right, let's start our demo. Okay, so today my theme is going to be The Simpsons. So here I have like just a generic type of building itself. You guys probably know how Simpson works. Now, right now, I just want to add interactions with the world. So let's say right now it's very boring. I just want to add a context. So how would you do it? So you see that there is a SketchUp. Let's say this is a SketchUp of a town of Springfield. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to export this out with texture. So the first thing you'll typically do is that you want to use OBJ. Okay. And I'm just going to place it under a SketchUp, export, Simpson Town. I should call it Springfield. So what this does is that it will basically take the SketchUp models and it will export out along with its texture. So inside the Revit side of things, the 2022 has a ability to import in OBJ. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm just going to open up a generic model template. I'm just going to change that to a site. Hopefully this, before this is done. The next thing I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go import. And it's going to basically bring up like what kind of objects. This is added in 2022, okay, OBJ. And the import category is going to be site. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my, is it finished? Almost done. Export. So I'm just going to copy that link path. Once this is done, I'm just going to import it in. So here, I'm just going to open that up. Is it done? Almost 95%. Come on. All right, everything's done. So you notice that there is like 125 materials and 25 textures. And then what you're going to do is that I'm just going to click on this OBJ and say hit open. And it tells you what size it's going to be. That's one thing I forgot to mention is that if you want to know the size, all you have to do in, let's say, SketchUp or any software is that you just have to make sure that you know what size it is. So here it says it's feet. So I'm just going to keep the same. No, actually, oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that when you export, double check. There we go. That's the units that you want to set. So that's the inches. So here I'm just going to set it to inches. Now, one of the caveats about OBJ import is that it's always going to fall flat. Basically, it's going to orient the models in a very weird way. So you kind of have to do, right now, it's what it does is that it takes the OBJ objects and just place it on elevation. So what you have to do is that you kind of have to rotate them manually. So just rotate it, making sure that the origin point let's see, there we go, there's right there. Just place it close. And unfortunately, there's no snapping. You cannot snap. So you just have to kind of guesstimate where it is. Okay, and here I'm just gonna move it to the right location. Let's see, that corner, just approximate, and place it there. Now, the benefit of this, the OBJ, is that when you click on realistic, you notice that material is going to be added to it. So you see that here, Simpson movies, it's going to be right there. So I'm going to save this as a Revit file. Let's say BIM content, places, Simpsons. I'm going to say Springfield. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load it into your into the project. So here I'm just going to load it in. Town of Springfield. I'm just going to go to the plan. And let's see, insert component. I'll just place it right there. Actually, let's see, right there. All right, once you have it the way you look, now you have the town of Springfield. And let's get this rendered. So here I'm just going to use the Enscape just to start it. So the process is very, very quick. So you could basically put in any characters, you could put in pretty much any interactive world. If it's able to have OBJs, you could just go import it, use Revit, and then use Enscape to basically just create this very, very quick interactive world. Now, one thing that one thing I have to mention is that if you export out the materials itself has to be JPEGs. So let's say, for example, in this particular one, they're all JPEGs. If you have like a TGA files or any other one that Revit cannot read, it will not pick up those materials. So just be aware of that. Yeah, it's going to take a while. Any questions so far? Yeah, depending on how many buildings you put in, this could take minutes to sometimes 30 minutes, depending on how complex the model. Since we're on Zoom, sometimes it can be slowing down. Oh, right, there we go. So there's your interactive building. Okay, so here I'm just gonna making sure I can click on auto exposure. I was playing around. Okay, so right now what you have is that you have a town of Springfield and then your building. I'm just gonna walk it in. So let's assume that you have a world. It's very dull, very boring. So let's say you want to add a music to this. Okay, so how do you do that? So I'm just going to pause for a minute in here, just pause live update. I'm just going to go to my floor plan. So if you want to add sounds to this, just to, let's say it's a sound of music, just place it in here. And I'm just going to go into my download. Let's see, picture. Oh, no, Simpsons, sorry. I should go to my Simpsons. No, just sorry about that. I messed up. Content, place, Simpson, and it's under material, audio, video. So Simpson song, main theme. There you go. That's the one I want. You place it in here. Okay, so in the sound, you're not going to hear it. You can turn on the volume. I would just typically say, okay, let's make it 100. Zero distance 100. And then now what I'm going to do is that in the general settings. Oh, actually, it's not here. So, okay, let's say resume live. And in here, you click on this, go to preference and click on embed. So can you hear it? So let's say you want to add video to this.
Sorry, where did you click? There on the right? Where did
Click
you
on this,
Okay.
preference, enable sound.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
So I'm going to get rid of that for now. Okay, so it's just going to shut it off. Okay, so now I want to add like a video texture. How would you do it? So let's say, for example, you want to add like a movie to this. So the first thing I would do is that you click on this material. Oh, I should have paused it, because what it does is that if you do not pause the Enscape, it would just does something on the background. I apologize for that. Okay. So what you're going to do is that you see that description here. This is where you're going to basically place where you want those videos to be. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to pick a path where I downloaded those videos, and I'm just going to basically just create a video out of that material. So let's see, places, The Simpsons, materials, audio, video. So what do you guys like? You like the Stonecutter or you like the Simpson Flintstone? Let's go with the Simpson Flintstone. So let's go with that one. And I'm just gonna basically just place it. Make sure the path it's correct. So I should make sure that all the path is the same. Okay, that's my path. And then this one, 4 and 2.25 is basically the size of the video. And when I hit OK, and you notice that inside the Enscape, it should start to pick up those videos. Let's see if it's okay. It's updating. Okay. Is it picking it up? No, it's not doing anything. All right. Technical difficulties, but let's see. Enscape, I'm just going to pause it for now, making sure that the path is correct. Because if there is a misspelling in any of this, oh, I see, there we go. Yeah, if there's a misspelling, yeah, you're going to run into a problem. So let's say I'm going to hit OK. At the same time, I want to add the sound to it as well. So just so that you can just get the sound. So Flintstone. It's going to place it there. Oh, I don't wonder. Okay, so now it's good. I'm just going to resume it live. And now what you're going to do is what's going to happen is that it's going to have both the sound. Yeah, sometimes it's not synchronizing it properly.
He's the greatest guy in history. From the town of Springfield, he's about to hit a chestnut tree.
Yeah, the video is going to loop itself, so I'm going to pause it now. So any questions so far? Oh, I should just stop that. Any questions?
I
so
mean,
far?
I just want to say this is joyful. Thank you so much. It's great.
No problem. Yeah, because I was thinking like, okay, maybe I should just come up with something that's fun. So there we go. So that's basically a very, very quick scene. So you can create pretty much anything inside Revit. So all you have to do is just take that OBJ and you know, you can just create anything. You know, I even have Thanos as well. Like if you're into the Marvel cinematic universe and stuff like that, yeah, you can basically just put in anything. So let's see, export. It's pretty much your own imagination. Now, the nicest thing about the OBJ is that the mapping, the texture, everything is included with it, so that you don't have to, you know, pick your brain and build all this stuff inside Revit, because it's nearly impossible. Okay, so if you love like superhero movies and you like to create a scene inside your Revit projects and stuff like that, yeah, just be wild with it. So Thanos, so OBJ. Oh, sorry about that. Any questions so far? Oh, there we go. So that's the Thanos. So this is all from OBJ import. So all you have to do is just download a model, import it in, and then, yeah, there we go. There's your Thanos. It's very lightweight. It's just like a 1 megabyte. It's like 1.9 megabytes. So it's not that bad. So if you want to render it, pre-rendered everything, it's all there. All right. That's it for this presentation. So if you have any question, feel free to contact me, right? And if you like the all the content that I've created, oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention. Let's let me share my screen. Okay, so if you want to download, like, let's say, for example, you like the Homer Simpson, there's a swear jar. There is one. You can go to BIM store. Just go user content, swear jar. There we go. So if you love Homer Simpsons and all that content, I basically create content and just upload to BIM store. So if you like those type of stuff, it's up there. I'm in a point of uploading all the Simpsons content to BIM store so that you guys can just download it and just put it and have fun with the content.
Simon, when you're modeling content, if Revit doesn't have the kind of morphic modeling tools that you want, what other tools do you like to model with?
I use AutoCAD too, like in the past, like the solid modeling and all that stuff. And I also use SketchUp. So those are the two software that I use. I play around with Rhino. It does work well. But I find that SketchUp is a bit better, because SketchUp allows you to have materials added onto it, so that when you share it with another person, you don't have to, you know, package all the texture materials and give it to another person. Everything is already pre-baked into the model itself. So there's a lot of content out there on SketchUp warehouses. I download a lot of stuff, and people just, yeah, just share a lot of those content.
Do you, just a follow up, you know, OBJ files are used to create Enscape custom assets or Enscape assets. Do you ever create custom assets as well?
Yes, I do.
For
Yeah.
Enscape?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Maybe not
Yeah.
today, but I would love to see you present that in a future setting.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
sit in.
Yeah. Yeah. I use it quite a bit. If, let's say, I'm using the older version of Revit, yeah, older version that doesn't have the OBJ import. But for this one, the reason why I show it, like, it's added into Revit, is that it's more akin to, you know, it's a couple of steps and user can just go in there and just update it. Whereas if you go to Enscape, you kind of have to do like a little bit more tinkering around. And sometimes people get lost in that. So I remember like helping one person just get that custom content. It can be very daunting, and it's only appearing on their machine. And sometimes they have to click on that share to share those content with the rest of the people. For this one, you don't have to do it. You can just put it on a server or somewhere and, you know, just load the content. And then the next person, if they open up the model, all the content is there because it's mapping it to a certain location. So it's up to the user how they want to use it. But yeah, this will bring people lots of other means to use Revit.
Absolutely. Thank you. And the other, and then you like to load the OBJ files into a family first and then put that into Revit. You don't, or do
That's
you
right.
also add the OBJ files directly into the project environment?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I like to do that. The reason why I like to do that is because if you import directly, it's very difficult to customize that object type later on, because OBJ is like once you import it in, there's no customization, nothing. It's just one straight import, and then that's it. It's there. Whereas if you put it inside a family, once you import them in, you're able to change it to different types of objects. And I know that the Enscape version, it's all like they have to put it as a planting. So for me, I like to, have a category for like, site or pretty much anything. So yeah, that's the unfortunate thing, downfall for the OBJ inside Revit, is that you're not able to scale it, whereas the Enscape version, you can scale it. So that's the nice thing. So if you think that the object is too big or too small, you can just scale it, and yeah, it works well.
Hi, Simon. This is Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, just a quick question for you. I was just wondering, have you used Format in the past? And if you have you found any advantages? What advantages have you found using SketchUp over using Format? Just because I'm hearing your description of bringing in like an OBJ file in, and then you can't really do anything with it other than bringing it into a family. I found that using Format has saved me. I can't even tell you how much time it's saved. Instead of having to do that round tripping, you can just go directly. It's bi-directional. So I would just want to know what you thought about that.
Yeah, it really depends on users' workflow. For me, it's like I have to cater to different users. Some users are really good at SketchUp, and some of them are really good at Rhino. And for Format, it's foreign to them. So there is like additional step for them. So for us, we do not want to burden them with so many different tools of learning. But I would definitely go that route if it makes it easier. But for a lot of users, it's that they grow up with a lot of the tools. They would not change for another thing. So you kind of have to cater to that. And that's basically how I find with a lot of the offices, is that you're not going to give up one tool just because the other tool has a better functionality. They usually like to stick it with whatever it is. And for me, my job is just to marry that two together. Like, how do you take this and put it inside Revit that works for both sides of things? For me, I could take their content and just directly import it into Revit and just create a scene. And that way, like, we don't have to compromise on, whatever tools they're using. But I certainly would love for our team to use Format. And it's something that I've been discussing with a lot of our users. But it all depends on the user side, whether or not that's their comfort level. So learning another tool.
Yeah, in my experience, it usually, more times often than not, it comes down to money and managing clients' expectations, right? So if they're shown that 2 steps back and 10 steps forward is financially the better option for them in the long run, then that starts to change the conversation a little bit. But yeah, I hear you. We're in an industry where it's well documented that a lot of companies are very prone to staying where they are and not really wanting to change. So yeah, I was just curious how, I as a recovering BIM manager, I understand that it's hard to toe the line between, you're having to meet the needs of the mass as opposed to like 1 or 2. So yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
And also look at more of a like long term, right? Whether or not Format it's going to last for another 10, 12 years or whatever. We're looking at like a future base. When you look at like SketchUp, it's been around for like ages, and that's becoming one of the industry standard. Format is just a new player coming into it. We don't know if Autodesk is going to kill it or not. I mean, Autodesk already released some sort of an Enscape type of competitors, and then they killed it in a couple of years. So it's like, for me, I have to look into that as well. Like, if you train a lot of users into using this, and then after that, Autodesk just killed it, and you basically just kill your entire investment doing that. So it's a sticky situation. But I wish Autodesk would be forefront about it, and add all the support, like basically better support for all their products, even if they're legacy. Don't kill it, just add that into their software so that future users say, okay, what is format or whatever it is. Like sometimes Autodesk could kill it in like a couple of years and we don't know it. So at least have that file format placed in there. Any other question?
That's great. Thanks, Simon. That was very useful.
Mm-hmm.
It's
All right,
pretty
thank you.
fun. Pretty fun to see. So I think we're just going to hand it over to Phil now so we can continue our fireside chat with Enscape and see all the fun stuff that Phil does.
No, I don't want to follow Simon. I want to stop the meeting and I want to go home and lay down and curl up into a ball.
We should have had you go
Simon,
first, huh?
That was joyful. And, as we announced earlier, the session's being recorded and it's only for your use, but with your permission, I would love to share the recording with my business partner because he loves this kind of joyful playfulness as well. So I really appreciate it, Roy. This is great. So let me share my screen. Can you guys see that? You should see.
Yep, we can see it.
here.
We got
There
it.
we go. I always like to ask. It's embarrassing when you start going a few minutes into a presentation. They go, "Is your screen moving?" And you remember. So I've got a good laundry list of things that you guys want to talk about today and learn about. And I'm just going down in the list of importance. I've moved only one thing down and I've added something as well. But you guys if you have a question, just unmute yourself and go, "Hey, Phil, what about this thing?" Because I don't even have the chat window open. And then I won't see it until it's too late. So we're just going to go through the list and some of this is going to be new to Enscape 3.4. If you haven't downloaded the latest version, you won't see some of these changes. So, and some of the questions actually had to do with that. So just going down the list, how to use and set up daylight and lighting settings that can be applied to saved views. So we're going to go back to Enscape and I'm going to close this little tab here. So we're doing it live, right? And we change the time of day. And then, in the video editor, they've got that nice 9 square. I wish they'd add that option in the live view because I like it for framing photographs and thinking about Enscape as sort of a photographic tool. So let's say you change the view to where you like it, you change the time of day where you like it, and then there's this option to manage views because we want to save this view back to Revit. And you guys can see my list of views here. So if we start to create a new view, it's just a little button down at the bottom, and we'll call it, just to be consistent, Enscape view 11. And then let's go down some of these options. So this gives us the ability to favorite the view, which is important. You can recall these views at any time, and they're really good for creating a nice narrative for your presentations and being able to go through those favorited views or any views for that narrative instead of having to manually navigate is important. If you favorite a view, the other advantage is that it gives you a quick and easy way to batch export rather than having to select your individual views and remember what they are. So we favorited the view now, and that'll push it up to the top of the list. So your project might have dozens and dozens of 3D views, but your favorited views will all perk to the top. You can also associate a view to a preset. So you have different visual styles. Depending on what I'm trying to render, I have a default version that I like because I tweak the Enscape versions. I also have a version that doesn't have any clouds in the sky. It's just a clear sky background. Then you could also have white mode or other visual styles. I'm just going to leave this at the default. And the default value here is it's already associated to this view type. The camera's explicit position, I don't really find that useful. It's good to know. And you can sort of move around and change the view. It's going to update accordingly if you had to tweak it a little bit more. And then you have the sun position. You can save the sun position inside of Enscape, but I'll also show you why you may not want to do that. So if you notice at the lower right-hand corner of the Enscape window, as I move the mouse, it's giving me the Enscape time of day here. And, I'm going to try to get it close and say that it's 10 o'clock. And then when it's 10 o'clock, it would be nice. I think it'd be better if you could actually save the time and not just the sun position, because that's kind of obscure. And then we say, okay, let's create the view. So that's going to create the view, and you can see that view inside of Revit. So that's how you can save the view. And in 3.4, you can also update the view. So let's go back and say, you know what? It's just not right. This is a kind of a gotcha. Let's say you want to update the view and you've moved it to where you want to update it, and then you select the view. Well, it's going to move it back. So really what you need to do is before you update the view, you have to go into the edit mode. Now we're back here and you go, you know what? I just want to tweak this a little bit. And we just want to change the time of day, let's say from 10 o'clock to 10:15. And then we're saving the sun position here, and then save it. That's going to update the view here. So let's say if you notice the sun position's right here on the corner of the little edge of the carpet. So if we go to view 10, it's going to move it around. If we go back to view 11, it's changed the time of day. It's saved it. So that's how you can apply daylight lighting settings to save views. So we covered that. But there's another issue that you guys, and we've also talked about the best method to create and modify views without having to save a new view. So that covers the other issue. However, if you want to provide a consistent time of day to multiple views, you don't necessarily, you can actually do it through Revit, and it's faster. So let me give you an example here. I'm going to go to this first view, and we can see that the shadows are on. And if we go to the render settings and go to the settings here, we see that it's a still day and it's for 3 p.m. Okay, I'm going to say okay to that. And then we're going to say, you know what, I want to render that 3D view 11 at the same time of day. So we go to the 3D view 11, and let's just turn on the shadows to see what it is. Now, initially, it's saved the time of day based on what Enscape pushed to Revit. So it actually saves it. But if we go to the render settings, and here, and we set it to still, we see that it's for 3:38. And we go, no, we don't want it for 3:38. We want it for 10. Not 10, what was the time before? 3 p.m. So 3 p.m., apply. And you go, oh, well, that's weird. 3 p.m. in Revit is really different than 3 p.m. in Enscape. Revit is by default, and Enscape by default is taking the location setting from Revit. But when you use the view settings from Enscape, it doesn't necessarily correlate. So initially, I like saving the time of day when I create the view, but then I like to use Revit to control that, because if you have multiple views, you can assign the time of day to multiple views, and you can even create a view template so that if you have multiple view locations where you want to see the same time of day for like solar studies, that's hard to go to each Enscape window and click, and change the time of day. Whereas a view template applied to multiple views and said, I want to see 9 a.m. all of these views is pretty simple. So I'm going to go back to Enscape, right? We've just changed the time of day to 3 p.m., which corresponds to this other view. Right, if we go to the time of day here, so view 1 and view 11, that's also 3 p.m. Now let's go back to Enscape. Oh, let me change this, close that. And I'm going to switch away from it to make sure it refreshes. Time of day, it doesn't change. This is the gotcha. So although Enscape will allow you to save a view and save the time of day, it doesn't read it back from Revit. This forces Enscape to display its information. We really need to change this. You need to make sure when you save your view, if you want to control multiple views with the same type of day, don't save the sun position from Enscape. It'll still push it back to Revit initially, but then you'll use Revit to continue to make that update. So I'm going to select save, and then I'm going to select view 10, right? It's going to do this. And now let's look at view 11. Oh, that's good, right? So here, view 11 has the time of day. And if you look at this little light here on the grass, and you can see that the edge of the shadow is there, then let's go to view number 1. Okay, So now the time of day is the same across multiple views. And when you batch export them, you get that solar study. Any questions there? I'm going to look at my next option. You guys can just, got my cheat sheet. You guys can just jump in and unmute and ask questions. All right. So saving specific view settings. It's not very obvious inside of Enscape where these are. If we open up the view settings, we're looking for a way to save them, and we don't see a button. There's nothing at the top where you might think there's this little obscure triangle. My eyes are over 50 years old, and I keep asking the dev team to put that somewhere else or make the triangle big. But this is where you save the view settings. Now, here's an important gotcha. Number one, if you're in a work shared environment and you change the view settings, Revit won't save them. There's a known issue, and there's no workaround other than to keep asking people to save and relinquish everything so that you can save a view setting. I think probably the best workaround now is if you have to batch export views and you have to save view settings and other people are trying to do production work, you probably want to open the project detached from central. So you have your own version and you can just change the render settings. Imagine you're not doing any production. You're just trying to save images, and that keeps it from conflicting with work sharing issues. The other thing is something that I don't like, and there's a lot of complaints in the forum about this, so yes, I'm biasing you, is there's no option here that tells you if you're inadvertently saving, overriding an important view setting. So if I start to change the default value here and then say, oh, I'd like to save that as a new preset, it's actually going to override it. And so what happens is people will go and start changing them and going, okay, now I'm going to save my new one. It saves it, but it actually keeps the old one, and it breaks, in my mind, it breaks things. I would rather be warned if you're changing something important. So probably what you want to do is, if you're going to save a view setting, don't start to tweak it. First, duplicate it, and then tweak the duplicate, and then you'll be okay. You won't break the one that already existed. So that's how you save a visual preset. Let me look at my cheat sheet here. How do you create, modify existing materials? So Enscape has the ability to add and manipulate materials, and there's a cap there. It's kind of a problem, because if I just go into Revit and I'm going to open up the material editor, all of the material values that you can get to are available in Revit, and they're not all available in Enscape. So if I look at a material here and go to its appearance type, we can see that, well, number one, I would also recommend that your materials be generic. See this word generic? They should be generic material sites, generic material types. And the reason for that is you get all of the ways to manipulate the material. There's another wood floor here, same material, but it's a wood asset. This is kind of a procedural material. And the challenge, in my opinion, with the procedural materials is that it doesn't give you all these options. It doesn't let you change every little thing about it, right? It's kind of simplified. So number one, I recommend using generic assets because you can get to everything. Number two, the Enscape material editor only sees generic assets. It doesn't see the procedural assets. So you're really another good reason to use them. The only time I would use the Enscape material editor is when you can't get to something inside of Revit that you need to get to. And one of the values that you can't get to inside of Revit is for something like a bump map. So let me go to the Enscape material editor. And if we look at, let's say you had brick and you really wanted to show a nice displacement map, when you get to the material, there's a couple of options for the height map. There's a bump map, a normal map, and a displacement map. Revit doesn't have a displacement map. So if you want that nice reveal where your mortar, recedes inside of the surface of your brick material, you can't get to that in Revit, and you really don't want to do it via the bump map setting. So this is an exception where I would use the Enscape material editor to get at something in Revit because I can't get to it through Revit. But otherwise, I just go through the Revit material editor for everything because I can see all of the options in one place as opposed to jumping back and forth between them. The challenge with the Enscape material library is that the materials, they're great materials, but it saves the materials when you're using them in an obscure location that other people in the project can't necessarily see. So rather than use the materials in the Enscape material library, or if I do, I will take the material out of that obscure location, go and find it, and then put it into the project custom material folder. So I don't go through the Enscape material editor because I need to keep things in a known location. There's a couple of great, and then they might be limited as well. I mean, they're great materials. They're just hard to get at the information about them. I like the SketchUp Texture Club material site, and then I just go and get a material, put it into the custom material folder, and then open up Revit, create a generic material type, and apply the material and other necessary values. So the Enscape material editor for Revit, I don't like to use it because it's hard to see that, it's hard to find the materials for a project with multiple users. I do like to use it with SketchUp because in SketchUp, it doesn't matter. It's kind of a single user environment. And if somebody else opens a project, they see the materials provided they have SketchUp as well. So I'm going to close that. How to create videos. This is a really long one. I don't know if that's, did anyone ask the question about, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Who's that?
Oh, this is Jim from Associate Engineering. I have a
Jim.
question about the, thanks for the presentation. So I do have a question. Do you have any experience to customize the old material, like for something like the rusty pipe or old building bricks, walls? Do you know
mean
how to do that?
For modifying the custom material that Enscape would provide?
Right. I found that all the materials are available in the libraries for new buildings, so new materials, but anything that we can do for existing old.
Yeah, that's why one of the reasons SketchUp Texture Club, go look up old rusty metal. I bet you there's something like it. It's a great site. It's just SketchUp Texture Club. Once you get an account, which is, you can get a free account, and I think you can download 1 or 2K materials, and then you have to register or pay $10, $12 a year to get 4K materials with a lot of other information. It's great, but you can get, the other thing is, when you do a Google search, let's open a web browser. I'm just gonna have to close that real quick. My friend is Google. So if you're looking for materials, if I look up stone and get images, it's going to show pictures of rock, but this isn't a very good stone for like a stone wall. But if you say stone material seamless and maybe texture, now you're going to get a lot of, like, you're going to get good seamless mapped materials. And typically I'll go with a size that's large, you know, not something that's 4K or 8K, but you're looking at 1K is pretty good. This is probably, you don't need a 2K texture. You're never going to see the detail. You could sample it back down to like 1200 by 1200 or something. But this is how you find seamless textures. So instead of stone, if we look up rusty metal, you're going to find nice materials. So before I even go to SketchUp Texture Club, I usually just go right to Google image search, and then you'll find in a lot of, and this thing about Pinterest, I hate this. So sometimes you have to say not Pinterest, and it doesn't show you Pinterest sites because when you click on them, when you try to view the file, you've got these watermarks on them. So it'll be annoying. But a lot of times you'll get in here, look, there's already one, Dirty Rusty Metal SketchUp Texture Club. So it'll actually take you to the good site. That's where I would get it. In Revit, a really nice thing you can do with your, let's say you've got piping and you want to show it as a texture that is real world, you can apply the texture as a material with the appearance type here, but then there's a setting in Enscape. Let's go here and back to Revit. It's a setting in Enscape, but you get to it via the general settings in Revit. And under Revit, there's 2 options. There's one for the appearance type and one for graphics. Graphics is your shaded value. And a lot of times in Revit, the shaded value is concurrent or similar to the appearance value. So like rusty metal will be kind of orange. But if you want an appearance value that's rusty metal, but in your analytic view, you want to see cold water, hot water, etc. You can have a graphic value that's red and blue and different colors, and you can switch between it here in Enscape, and then it'll show you an analytic value if you model the system by type with a color. If you use filters, Enscape doesn't view filters yet, and I hope to see filter visualization in the future because it will be really useful in Enscape. Any other questions?
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, I'm going to skip over the video creation, multiple view angles and the time of day. I think we covered that, right? Where you save different view angles. Let's go back to a hidden line where you save multiple view angles and then go back to Revit and set the time of day in Revit, and then make sure you uncheck that option in the Enscape view, because otherwise it won't let Revit show through. How to improve shadows and renders. So improving shadows, I like to say, don't think of Enscape as a rendering tool. Think of yourself as a photographer and you're trying to get a really nice image. So I'm just going to scroll down and look at this shadow, and you can see it's just so severe. But in photography, when you get those nice balanced shadows, it's usually because the day is a little cloudy and we've got clouds in the sky. So what if we change the time of day a little bit one way or the other, and all of a sudden the clouds disappear or just become a little less apparent? Let's change a little bit more. Yeah. Oh, well, maybe I like that. So you can change the shadows a couple of different ways. You can just change the time of day, and until this cloud comes between the sun and it diffuses the light. That's kind of like what happens in the real world. Under the atmosphere settings, let's say you can't change the time of day, you want the time of day, but you need that shadow to appear lighter. Well, you can decrease the shadow sharpness. You can also turn down the sun brightness. That will decrease the severity of shadows. And you can also go to the sky settings. You can increase the cloud so that the whole sky is really cloudy, and that will make the shadows softer as well. So those are some options for changing the shadows so they're not so severe, right? Just want them to be nice. When you edit a video, changing the time, we should do another thing on video creation and best practices, because I've written an article about it. It's on LinkedIn. There's some really good tips about using the video editor, but it's a whole session by itself, and we just don't have enough time to get into the details with you guys feeling overwhelmed. Setting up materials. For Revit, I like using the material editor because I can get to everything. I don't like using the Enscape material editor or the Enscape materials unless there's something I can't get to from Revit. And the one exception for me is that displacement map setting. How best to render glazing. So glass is a computationally expensive rendering thing. You don't actually want to create glass. Like in this case, this glass is actually solid and it's kind of a brownish color to give it that kind of filtered look. But for your building facades glazing, it's really expensive. Oh, actually, this is not, and I'll show you why in a minute. You can just apply material like glass and then you go, oh, it doesn't look good when you render. So instead of selecting the material and giving it a color that just permeates the whole glazing, what I would suggest you do is use the paint tool. So open up the family and then use the paint tool. Let's go up here to get the color for the glazing that you want. So in effect, you're just kind of putting in a thin film, and your paint tool in Revit can be applied parametrically. So you can apply a material as a parameter and then later on decide what color it's going to be. It's not like you have to, you don't just have to apply the paint tool and then create a new family for red glass, a new family for yellow glass, a new family for purple glass. You can just apply the paint tool, and then as a parameter, you can choose a color later. This seems to give a better overall impression for glazing than making the glass solid. And I'll show you the example. I misspoke before when I said this table was solid glass. Do you see this artifact on the table where the edge appears darker than the surface? This is a situation where I've taken the paint tool and I've applied the paint tool to the top of the glass and probably to the bottom, but then I've taken another darker version and applied it with the paint tool to the edge. And that's the only way to get that kind of artifact that you would see in the real world. Okay, so that's my best practice suggestion for glazing. Don't give the glass an entire solid material, use a paint tool to apply it to the surface. And that's also a really good way to apply like a frit pattern or to glazing, like frosted glazing, where you might have to have privacy glass where, you know, at the bottom it's clear, but then as it goes up, it becomes more and more opaque. You can do that with a paint tool. I will show you, I'll get to it later. I've got it at the end. So that's glazing, improving interior renderings of lights, renderings and lights. I'm not exactly sure what this means. So if somebody asks that question, there's a couple ways to present, you know, to create illumination in Enscape, but I'm not entirely sure what you mean. So I'll just talk about that for a moment, and then we'll see if we get to it. I'm going to turn down the time of day. And then what's going to happen naturally in Enscape is as we turn down the time of day, things are going to start to illuminate. Some things illuminate because they have lights in them. By category, there are light, they have light objects. Some things illuminate because it has a material with self-illumination, and you wouldn't want it to be a light. You wouldn't want it to schedule as a light or anything. So think about an exit sign. In a low light condition, you want an exit sign to appear as a light or appear illuminated, but you wouldn't build an exit sign and then call it a light category. Maybe it's specialty equipment. And the way that you do this is, let me just go back to this 3D view, and I'm going to open this little family, and I'm going to zoom in and shade it, and then I'm going to reach in and select that color, and we're going to go to the material. Oh no, that's the case. Let's just go into the material settings. So the material settings for the exit sign, which are red, there we go. I just called it red lens. You know, there's a light inside, makes it plastic glow. Under the appearance settings, you can give here's another good reason to use a generic material. You can give it self-illumination, and it doesn't take a lot. So only a luminance value of 30 on a range from like 10 to 10,000. So 30, not very much on that scale. And that gives it enough of an appearance that it looks natural, that it looks like it's a glowing object. So yeah, egress signs. That's a good reason to use illumination of material. This sign appears to be flashing. It's actually a texture that's animated. You guys saw how Simon was applying textures. This is just a texture of solid colors, and the solid color apparently it has a hue value of 100%, and then it transitions quickly to a hue value of like 25%, and then back to 100%, and it gives the effect that the light is flashing, but in fact, it's just an animated texture that's changing the hue value. And it's all synchronized because you can do it in a photo edit. You can do it in a video editing tool, just create solid colors. And that's how we're getting this effect.
Hey, Phil.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, there was a question put in the chat about what do you think Enscape's role is going to be now that Autodesk is partnered with Twinmotion and Revit?
That's philosophy. I'll talk about that at the end. It's a good question. So exit signs, something like where I would use illumination as opposed to a lighting object is something like any accent lighting under kitchen cabinets, reveals for lighting. Yeah, things like flashing signage. I'm going to double click this little piece of geometry, and I'm going to say, oh, there's this little ring under here. And here it's got an accent light, or it's got a material. It's called recessed lighting. At the moment, it doesn't have any illumination. So I'm going to go back into Revit, select the family, and just as a reminder, show you what it looks like in Enscape, and then go back here and say the seat material, the base material. Let's go into the stool accent light. Okay. And we'll get to the material. Here's another reason I like using material in Revit is I can find what they are. Whereas in Enscape, if you pick it, you're trying to figure out what the material is. Like it's very circuitous. In Revit, if I pick the family, it takes you to the instance or type parameter. So here's a stool accent light under the appearance tab. Here's an option for self-illumination. And I don't know why Revit's showing initially red here. It should be red. Self-illumination on a value of 10 to 10,000. Presently, it's set to 10. So we'll just say it's let's say it's 30 again. and say, okay, and close this option. Then they go back to Enscape. And now you get a nice lighting effect. All right, so there's your accent lighting. I think that's a lot easier in your kitchens and your break rooms when you have nice accent lighting under the casework. It's a lot nicer than during design mode, putting individual lights under each piece of casework. You can just pick a material, apply it with a paint tool, and give it self-illumination to get past the design process. Next question, interior renderings. How to use and control Enscape materials? Kind of talked about that. The VR function, I can't really present it, but I can talk about it briefly. Enscape has support for Oculus Rift, which actually doesn't get built anymore, so it's Oculus Quest, HTC Vive, Windows Mixed Reality. And basically what you do is you install the software, you plug in the headset, and then you push this button if you have a headset plugged in, and that will show Enscape inside of the VR headset. You can't make any changes in the design environment. You can navigate and change time of day, but you can't move geometry around like a game engine. Would be kind of interesting if you could do that, but you can't do that yet. Any caveats? Oh, I would recommend not using a wireless system because you want to have very fast frame rate. When you move your head, if the frame lags, you get what's called motion sickness, and you don't want to make your client or your team members motion sick. The other thing is I've noticed people get vertigo. Video games are designed in a way that you're not supposed to hurt yourself in VR, although I've seen examples of people accidentally doing it. There's a great viral video of a girl playing a game or someone playing a game where she's where the person is in a first-person shooter, and a person takes a pin out of the grenade to throw it and drops it. And the other people in the real world start laughing because they're looking on a screen. Well, she panics and bolts to run away from the grenade, right? And goes smack into a stone fireplace. So I don't put the clients into a VR environment where they're standing because they're going to navigate places they don't mean to. I put them on a chair if they're supposed to be standing on a stool, so they're up at eye height, and if they're supposed to be sitting at task level on a low chair with wheels. But that keeps me from being at risk when they get vertigo because they're going to explore. I've seen every time customers start looking around at VR and they can point and click and quickly look around the building. Next thing they're up on the roof and they're all excited and they go up to the parapet and they get vertigo and just start to fall backwards. And it's happened more than once. So it's hard to catch people when they fall backwards. Gravity comes at you fast. So I always have people seated when they're in VR. And number two, I always have them on a tethered system so they get the fastest frame rate, don't get car sick. That's the option there. Should we add Enscape materials to Revit templates? I would say no. It's going to be tedious. I would just add materials to Revit template. It doesn't have to be the Enscape one. If you want to really want to add the Enscape materials to the Revit template, what you have to do is go into the Enscape material editor, material library. You have to save these materials. You select it, and then you import the selection into Revit. And then you have to go dig down into your Windows path and find the material. And then you need to take that material and move it out of that obscure location on your computer into a central location in your server. And then you have to remap the path in your template to the material in that predictable location. You could do it and it'll look good, but I wouldn't just take an Enscape material, open your template, select material, import selection. It's not going to show up inside of Revit when somebody else starts the project because they don't have that obscure path to that material. How to edit materials for existing objects. I'm going to presume that is editing the material of an Enscape asset. You can't do that right now. It's something that's been requested a lot to be able to change materials because you might like a piece of furniture, but you don't want it to be orange, or you might like the furniture, but you just want it all to be white, just context. You don't want to see any material that distracts from the design. You can't change the materials of objects without a lot of trickery. And then I wouldn't recommend all that trickery. It just can't be done. What I would recommend is if you have, so the thing with the Enscape assets, let me close this and go back into Revit. So maybe this is a little bit in line with what Simon was showing. So here's our, Enscape task chair or Revit task chair. It's great for the design environment because I know what category it is, which means it's going to schedule properly, it's going to tag properly, and it's very lightweight with regard to how it displays. Enscape also has content. I don't like to put Enscape assets in most cases directly in the Revit project because let's go into office stuff. Here's office furniture. If you put an Enscape asset directly into Revit, you're getting something that's of a planting category, and it's not really designed to schedule. It's more entourage, right? So if you need things to schedule and behave properly, they're not going to behave properly. I don't want this kind of noise inside of a Revit project. And when you put it in, it's not going to schedule. Maybe boxes of pencils and entourage like people and plants, things that, or yeah, people, cars, things that really don't get scheduled in the architectural environment. Maybe that kind of entourage, I just put it in because I'm not going to show it in the document set. I'm just going to display it in renderings as kind of honest clutter. I don't want real things for the project for a lot of reasons inside of Revit directly. So there's an obscure little thing here, and Enscape added this lately. Whenever you're hovering over something to select it, there's this little drop down. It says place the asset, which is the default value, but at the bottom it says link a Revit family to the asset. Because here's what we're presently seeing inside of Enscape. Let me go back, turn up the lights, right? This chair on the left is great for Revit, but it leaves a lot of, it's emotionally kind of empty. The chair on the left is it's got all of that detail that you wouldn't want to build in a Revit family, but it doesn't know what it is, and so it's not useful in Revit. This third way is really nice. You select the object, and it says link Revit family to this asset. And then you find the family and the type. So let's go to task and select it. So if you have one family you can have one family with many types, and you can have, in this case, different office chairs associated to the same family, but each displaying their own unique type to each type. So to share task, okay. And nothing really changes inside of Revit. But if you select that Revit family down here, it's added the Enscape asset information that would normally show up for an Enscape native asset. And now when we go back to Enscape, the Revit family has been swapped out for the Enscape asset, and you still have the ability to see the Revit family. And if we copy one of these to a new location, and let's say we rotate it, right, it's all going to be concurrent. That keeps your documents light, keeps your Revit project graphically clean. You know that things are going to schedule properly, and then Enscape can show all of that detail, right? And so I recommend for most things that are architectural, create a meaningful placeholder in Revit. If it's, a vending machine or an espresso machine, create a nice box. The only caveat is you can't change the orientation or location origin of an Enscape asset. So if your Revit family, in this case, this task chair back in Revit, I had to modify it so that its origin was actually pretty close. It was around the center of it. But I had to change the origin. I had to rotate the Revit chair. And sometimes that can be tedious because, parameters break if you start rotating the geometry. But other than that, you have to change the family to make it concurrent to the orientation and origin of the Enscape asset. I'm going back up. The last thing that I have, and I know we're just right up at the end of the time, is the option for the site tool context. I should really, to do this, I'm gonna close Enscape and open a new project and open Enscape to display this. So let's go to File and I should have this the sample house here. Third time's a charm. Sample house, that's what I want. And I don't want to save Revit. I just want to open this new project. And let's go to a default 3D view, and then let's restart Enscape. So Enscape added site context as a feature. The problem is, in my opinion, it's kind of half-baked. In the examples they show, to be honest, it works great. And that's an urban environment where the buildings are very blocky. and not a lot of detail. And the building they're using as an example is a pretty big kind of commercial office type building, and it works with the context. But depending on the scale of your project and the type of your project, it doesn't always work. And I see that there's chat here. Okay, so let me just close this, Laura's. So here's the thing. So here's how you actually use it, but I'll display how to use it, but also I'll be honest and talk about why it's not always useful for the type of project that you're doing. So you're going to want to go to your site context option. And we're going to add site context. And I've already done this before, so it knows where to go, but basically I'm typing in an address. And you can change the amount of context. You don't want to do the whole city. It's going to make your file way too big. So just choose an area that's large enough. And if I zoom in here, you can see this is how the building is going to come in by default. And I'm just going to leave this because I want to come back to it and show you, what the workflow is going to look like. When you bring in the building and context by default, it's going to turn off any adjacent structures that it touches. You can turn them on later, and I'll just do that. I'm going to go down here to the building, and I'm going to choose this, where is it? Scarlet Oak Lane. And as we scroll down, we see that some of these are turned off. So by default, it turned off those buildings. You can turn them off here. You're just hiding them. Or if you select them and right click, you can say hide selection. Oh, I want to get that one out of the way. I want to get that one out of the way. So you can turn off some stuff if they're, let's say they're getting demolished. So we've talked about, we can see the buildings, we can see the streets and sidewalks. So you can select them here. You can also select them in the view if you want to hide them in context. I know this location. There's a small creek in the backyard. Right away, I thought, well, this doesn't have enough site features. And at this scale, the design is very granular, but the context is very Lego-like. I mean, these houses, this is a residential neighborhood. These houses, they don't even have the roof pitches. It's not enough information. This is why I think it's kind of limited in usefulness. Depends on the project scale. But I do want to quickly display it. Not only does it not show important features like there's a stream between these two neighborhoods, it doesn't show the topography accurately. There's a lot of slope, between this location and down here back to this stream. It must be 15, 20 feet of elevation change. It's fairly steep, and you can't see that elevation change. So kind of not useful. There's also this option for the native site. So Enscape looks at the category of Revit and says, oh, you have this option. Rather than hide it in Revit and then create problems with workflow, you can just hide it here. You can turn it off. Now you have the option as well. You go, well, this is not oriented properly. We have to orient it in the right direction. So the way to orient it is to select these three little bars, and you can edit the site context. You can also update it. Here's the option to hide any overlapping data. That's happening by default. I'm going to edit the site context and show you the limitations of this. With regard to setting the elevation, you can move it around this way. I'm just pressing and dragging. I'm pressing the left mouse button and moving, and it's changing the origin, or it's changing the location of the project. And then you don't really have a good option here to rotate it. If I'm holding this option here, we can move it in kind of very clunky fashion. It's not really smooth. So I tend not to use a rotation here. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. I'm going to go back to the movement. If we hold the shift key down, you see that it's moving the site, or you don't have to hold it. It's just doing it by default. If you hold the control key down and move it, it's going to change the elevation. The nice thing about this is these values here to change the elevation, X, Y, and Z. Can you believe that the Z value in architectural civil terms, Z is usually relative to sea level, it's up and down, but the Z value in Enscape, they set it to left and right, side to side, because it corresponds to how other 3D environments tend to model space, X, Y, and Z. Z is away from you. And they just did that because that's how modeling programs do it. And we all threw our hands up in the air and said, what? We don't care about modeling programs. This is how architects do it. There's hundreds of years of consistency here. Z positive is above sea level and Z negative is below sea level. So yeah, I don't tend to use this to change the elevation because it's like if I type in the Z level, it doesn't go up and down. So I just hold the control key down and hold the right mouse or left mouse button and move the mouse. Now it comes to, oh, we want to orient the project. And if I showed you before, if you use a rotation tool, it makes these big chunky movements. It's not smooth. So there should be a better way. And there is. I'm going to go ahead and save these changes. At least, you know, the origin this way and up and down this way has changed. If we select the update site context, we go back to the map and you can zoom in. And I'm just going to go here and zoom in a little more. Oh, there's a rotation option. So in a nice orthogonal top-down view, you can rotate the building. I say, okay, well, it should be perpendicular to the street. I'm going to choose this back side. That's the actual, this side faces the creek that we can see here, but we can't see it in 3D. And then this changes the location. So let's move that. Oh yeah, it should be back here more. So to me, this is easier for moving the building around in plan as opposed to seeing it in 3D and trying to move it because you don't exactly see where it is. And then select import, and it's actually going to update it. You can't change the Z elevation here, but you can change the rotation. So I tend to just use the rotation and do it that way. And that's how we change the site context. We go, oh, it looks like the front of the building here is a little bit high with regard to the site. So that's where I might go into you might go into the edit site context and then hold the control key down. And now we're going to move the site. You see where it starts to get that wall, right where it starts to hit that wall. And then you go, okay, update. And now we can see how it slopes away in context with the neighborhood. So is it useful? I think it depends on scale. If it's important to see the context as realistically as your customer needs, probably better just to model the site in a tool and pull that in as context so you can see things. Because otherwise, when you're down here, you know, your customer wants to see, well, what am I going to see from my back deck that overlooks this nice creek? And you go, oh, you're going to see little square boxes. And they go, oh, that's not enough. I want to see where, you know, I want to see a lot more detail. So I think it's useful to a point, but it may not be it may not be useful in all situations, but that's how it works. And that's what I've got today. That's the presentation. Do you guys have any other questions? I should open up the chat window just to make sure. Oh. So the thing with, so the question about Enscape and Autodesk is teaming up with Twinmotion and Revit. Like I said, it's philosophy. Autodesk teams up with companies all the time. The customers that I've spoken to are going to stop using Lumion and use Twinmotion because of a cost issue and a quality. They like the quality in Twinmotion, but they're not stopping their use or purchasing of Enscape. And yeah, I could go into I've got a long list of like internal questions and, you know, where are they trying to take the business? Because Epic Games is a $4 billion company on Fortnite alone, and they have 1,000 employees, and Autodesk has 10,000 employees with $2 billion a year in business. So what's Epic trying to do? That's the real interesting part. So you'd have to buy me a coffee if we're going to talk about that. Anything else?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Simon. I won't follow you again. Just remind me that. That's it. Unless there is any other questions, I'm going to say thank you very much. And I appreciate you guys allowing me to present. And I'm looking forward to getting on airplanes and presenting in person once things settle down a little bit. And I hope you guys have a great day and looking forward to doing this in the future again, hopefully in person. All right. That's it.
Thank you.
Everyone have a great day. I'll send this recording to Laura and you guys should get it, you know, probably by end of week, if not sooner. Take care. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.